Welcome, everybody. My name is Andy, and we have our first ever interview session for the Tampa Bay Activist Network. Today, with me, we have Dayna Lazarus, and I'm going to let Dayna introduce herself rather than me do it. So, Dayna, please tell the people who you are.
Hello, my name is Dayna, and I've been working on social justice issues for a pretty long time. I was doing stuff in Portland, Oregon several years ago, and I moved back to the Tampa Bay area in 2015 and got involved in the fight for 15 and the election in 2016. And I was an organizer for climate justice. I got really interested in how transportation impacts climate justice,
Right.
as well as other like social justice issues. So I went and got a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning at USF and have done some work in the field. And but we still got to do a lot of grassroots stuff. Primarily, that's the way we get stuff done. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about Portland as like the model for like a bunch of different stuff like that. So I know that they're doing a lot of like forward thinking stuff. So it's cool that you were there, but even cooler that like a lot of times it takes resources to get things done, and education is a resource. So that's really cool that you went and got a degree in something that will fuel a lot of the things that you're pushing towards. And you really just described like a bunch of stuff, because obviously like being in the coalition, we try to touch on a lot of different things, but it sounds like you're doing that too, which is awesome. But today we've been connected because of the urban renewal program, but obviously you will tell us all about that. So I think the big thing on a lot of people's minds right now is Tampa's been growing for a while, right? And the housing market is wild, and we just see historically Black communities being targeted once again, but even more so right now. Places that Tampa used to not touch, like near the university or Seminole Heights, are just being like uprooted in a way that just can't be ignored. And it looks like now you have recently written a press release about Tampa Heights specifically, but again, turn it over to you. So tell us like what's that about? What's going on?
yeah, so I've been looking at the history of discriminatory transportation planning. I did a master's thesis on equity in transportation planning and had to look at the history of it, but it is actually still a present day issue. And in fact, there is right now a fight, as you mentioned, happening right this moment where it's a perpetuation of the injustices and just like the worst kind of transportation planning, where FDOT is right now widening the highway through the urban core of the city of Tampa. And it does primarily impact Tampa Heights. That's the neighborhood where the widening is starting right now. It actually started this past Monday.
31st, right?
So yeah, so Monday, January 31st, they broke ground to widen the highway at Nebraska Avenue. The same day, they also sent out a demolition crew and demolished an historic, what they call a contributing structure building in Tampa Heights that the community had been fighting. They had plans for years to utilize this building. And when they found out that FDOT was moving forward with demolition, they really amped up the fight to save it for the past few months. And that's a longer conversation too. But sure. Basically, they submitted an offer, and FDOT was like, no, screw your offer. And they just ignored the offer and
threw it away because they're going to steamroll with what they want.
It was really a tragedy to the folks in that neighborhood and the people who've been fighting it to wake up on Monday morning and not only feel the vibrations and the pile driving of the highway widening, but to also see this structure that we have been fighting tooth and nail to save get demolished right in front of us.
Yeah, and it really brings, I mean, the fight's always at home. I think a lot of times people think the fight is elsewhere, but it really it is, like you said, shocking to wake up and feeling like rumbling. But it's unfortunate to remember to people that a lot of times when we talk about these issues, they're happening right at home, but it just is whether or not you see it. They are doing it conspicuously where you are, right? So yeah, that's terrifying. So I'll ask the question that maybe some people have on their minds. So when you say, oh, like they're doing a highway widening, a lot of people in Tampa complain about traffic, and they're like, okay, great, like traffic's gonna be better. I hate 275. But you, as an educated person, tell us, like, why isn't that a good thing?
So there's something called induced demand. Induced demand works for a lot of different things. And it's kind of that concept of If you build it, they will come. With transportation capacity, they call it increasing capacity. When they add lanes, and this has been proven in studies over the past couple decades, those lanes fill up. When you create a new lane, people will actually divert the route that maybe they were taking because they think, oh, there's a new lane there. I'm going to go faster. So it's basically like a gas in an empty route, like it just fills.
Yeah.
And you are widening the highway, widening, and it's just going to continue to fill, and we're going to run out of space. I would say already the space is not worth what it's being used for. I prefer to ride my bike. A lot of people can't drive. It feels like a nuanced issue, but it's really simple. It's called induced demand.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of people feel like it's a catch-22 because, Florida, especially Tampa, was kind of built on the idea of having a car. And so they probably push this idea of, more cars, more people on the road, et cetera, et cetera. And then we don't really have like the cushion of amazing public transport that other cities do. I have ridden public transport for an extended period of time because for a while, because of like medical conditions, I couldn't drive. So yeah, I used the busing system, and yeah, it'll get you to your place if you are on one of the major routes. But if you're trying to get somewhere specific, it's going to be hard. And if you're not on a bus route, it's going to be hard. So that just places even further restrictions on disabled people. And so like everybody is just like being caught between this endless loop of like, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. But you're absolutely right. We don't need those extra lanes. I don't know how far the lane expansion is, but let's pretend it's like 5 miles. How many buildings or how many residences or how many things have to get demolished or moved or repurposed for that to happen? A lot. And then, like you said, they're just going to do it again. Like they're just going to do it so that it fills up and nothing really changes. Yeah. So
like the highway was the pipe dream, the long-term vision of transportation of the future, of these specific people that were planning our cities of the future back in the 1920s through the 1950s. And it is worth mentioning that this was a group of just powerful white men. It was powerful white men who had stock in companies. A lot of it was actual lobbyists from like General Motors and the concrete lobby, which is still really powerful today in the state of Florida. And they had this vision of everybody being able to drive everywhere. And it made more sense back then when the population was a fraction of what it is now. But the roads physically, geometrically cannot handle the number of people that are here now and are coming here. We have a major population influx to the Tampa Bay area, which is again a whole another topic, but it is happening. So that was their vision, and we need to have a new vision, one that actually suits what we're like the conditions of today's society.
Right. And this is a perfect segue because you've just told us like what's going on. So in regards to that new vision, what should people be looking out for, or / what is the new vision that we should be pushing for? What can people do that are watching this?
Transportation is about so many things. It is the space in between every single thing that we do every single day of our lives. It impacts our physical health and our mental health. It impacts what we see on a day-to-day basis, what we do, how much time we've wasted, whether or not we're isolated from other people or able to be around other people. Transportation is also about so many different types of justice because, for example, it is about climate justice. The 2018 IPCC report found that the American transportation system was the top greenhouse gas producing sector of all of the sectors as of 2017. And the reason for that is our car dependence. Like it specifically said, a lack of diversity of transportation modes is the reason why we are polluting so much and it's driving climate change. It's a criminal justice issue because it might be more difficult to get a job that's closer to home when you are a returning citizen. I'm sure lots of people in Tampa have been told you can only have this job if you have a car.
Yeah, some people literally say like, do you have a means to get here? And if the answer is no, right, then they can't.
You can't have a life. And also to me, transportation is about access. Like it's literally about freedom. It's about freedom and access to spaces and to your family and like fun things to do and access to meetings to organize for a better city, for a better future. Like transportation is like so many things.
I mean, it's kind of like water. We don't realize how important water is until we find out we might not actually have any more left.
According to best practice in transportation planning and urban planning, the type of transportation that we need to be planning is very holistic. Literally, if you step outside of the state of Florida, pretty much, or like even like Atlanta has great transportation, but like most other cities or metropolitan areas are the size of the Tampa Bay metro area, has great examples of the types of transportation you should be planning, especially if you leave the United States.
Absolutely, if you leave the United States.
Yeah, in Bogota, Colombia, utilizes a gondola system to get people from the suburbs into the city center. So it's really about options, having different like mode options, and they call mode, like a transportation mode, like a bus or a bike or walking. And all of that is supported by infrastructure. And so when we're spending money on road widening, when we're spending money on just road maintenance, which is, by the way, so expensive. People think that having roads isn't expensive. They're like, public transportation is so expensive. It's really not that much more expensive than roads. Like, we need to invest in safe infrastructure for bicycles to not have to interact with pedestrians, because they're going very different speeds. That creates a conflict and can be very dangerous. It's really just how we are using our physical space and where we're putting our money. Are we putting our money into roads, or are we putting our money into sidewalks? It's really that simple.
Right. And so for example, like to our viewers, would doing research on, because we have elections coming up, doing research on candidates who are pro-diversifying our modes of transportation, that's like one option. Any more that you can list? Because obviously, like, people want to know, like, what can they do?
There's a couple things. In addition to actually pressing candidates on their position on public transportation and transportation in general, pushing for multimodal transportation, it's very notable that our HART bus system, Hillsborough Area Regional Transit, that you were talking about earlier, it hasn't seen a rise in its revenue since it was created in 1979, 1980. At that time, Hillsborough County voted for a 1 mil tax, and that has remained HART's budget since 1979. Even while our population has grown so immensely and our city has grown so much, our entire bus system uses as much funding as other bus systems use on just their tires. That's a fact that I heard a while back that I just cannot get out of my brain. Like, they're on a shoestring budget.
That's horrible, especially when we know the city has a lot of money that it's throwing in places that we have adamantly said that we don't think it needs to go there. And even just throwing our only public transport system, the HART bus, even just another $1 million could drastically improve stuff. And we knew that they recently tried to take out the benches at a lot of the bus stops, and then people were like, hello, and then they put them back in. So you had the money to do labor and unlabor it. So can we put some money to actually, make this thing stronger and actually work for more people, especially when you're actively displacing them right now?
I wanted to mention that because there's a solution being proposed. I also want to mention that our city, as well as like Temple Terrace, like the cities within Hillsborough County, as well as the Hillsborough County jurisdiction, can budget more money or certain monies towards public transportation. Like they really have like this budget pool, and exactly as you said, they really do choose to put more money into, like the policing system than public transit. There is money that comes from the same place that can be split differently.
No, yeah, go ahead and talk about the sales tax.
Okay. So in 2018, transportation activists ramped up again to pass a sales tax to fund public transportation. There were some critics saying that it's a regressive tax. It's not taxing, but that means that it taxes everybody the same. So a very, very rich person or a developer is paying the same as somebody who doesn't have a job, because it's a sales tax, everybody's paying 1 cent. And so a lot of people were saying, no, we need to get like the developers to pay for transportation. And these are all options. A place like Seattle, the city of Seattle, has like 28 different revenue sources, last time I checked, which was years ago, for their transportation. So here, once again, for HART, we have that one, as well as some grant money. I wanted to make sure to say that too. They do get some grants from the federal and state government, mostly federal. So in 2018, we petitioned, like we literally had to petition 80,000 people, and it was a paid campaign effort. It was invested in by like Vinnick and some of these like really rich people in Tampa.
Vinnick being the owner of the Lightning.
Yes.
I know.
Yes. Things. Yes. He's the one who's developing Water Street downtown by Channelside.
Right. Yeah, that whole strip is entirely him, Bill Gates, and USF. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he's got money and he's investing it in Tampa, and he recognizes the need for public transportation here. I mean, right. Amazon HQ rejected us outright because we don't have public transportation, which I say, yay, we don't want them here. But it's still very telling. Like these big employers.
When the devil says that your living conditions aren't enough, that says something. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So he funded this campaign. He was one of many funders, and we got enough petitions, and then we campaigned to ask people to vote for the sales tax, and we won. And when I say we, it was an effort called All for Transportation. Okay. And so in 2018, in November of 2018, they successfully passed a 1-cent sales tax for transportation.
And you know what? I remember that. I remember voting for that and reading it and rereading it over and over again. I was like, this says what I think it says, right? And I was just like, I mean, yeah, for sure. So that's cool that we get full circle. I was ignorant, voted on it, and now we have you looping in all the behind the scenes. And it really is not as easy as sending a petition. Getting a petition done, it takes a whole fleet of people and money.
It's great, except for the fact that Republican County Commissioner Stacy White sued his own county government. So maybe you didn't hear this part. It sucks. He claimed that the sales tax that was overwhelmingly passed by 58% of the Hillsborough County voters was unconstitutional. So it went up to the Florida Supreme Court, and the Florida Supreme Court ended up, which by the way, was appointed by Republicans. So right. They do have a political ideology as well. They ruled that our sales tax was in fact unconstitutional, and they ended it. So they were collecting 1 cent sales tax for transportation for about a year and a half, and they had like almost $300 million from that sitting in this trust fund. And now they have to waste more county money figuring out what to do with it, how they're going to give it back to us or whatever. There was one legal critique or briefing or whatever on this case that said that if the majority of voters vote on something, it's implicitly constitutional. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
If voters, there was a majority and they said they wanted this, it's constitutional.
It's just, So basically there was like one little thing in there. There was a technicality that they were able to overturn this on. And the technicality was, and it's so ironic. In the charter amendment that created this 1 cent sales tax, it created an independent oversight committee of citizens, right, appointed, who had to apply and go through a process, and then they would be appointed to this IOC. And the independent oversight committee would look at every project that was proposed to use this money, this trust fund money, and determine whether or not it was in line with
within the
goals
interest
of the charter.
Of what the right.
Because the charter, first of all, the charter put 45% of the income from the revenue from the sales tax to HART. So that chunk is gone. Then it parsed out the rest of it. It was like 21% to walk bike infrastructure. There was different amounts. So they were just making sure that everything proposed was within these amounts. So what happened is Stacy White said that an unelected body shouldn't be allowed to do that. It should be up to the elected county commissioners to decide how to use our money because there's more accountability there because they're elected. And it's funny because the IOC was put into this charter amendment in the first place because in 2010, when we tried to pass the sales tax, almost identical, there was no IOC. And Republican County Commissioner Sandy Berman said she didn't want voters to write a blank check. So the IOC was created.
Was the solution for that.
Yeah. And then another Republican commissioner was like, that's not good enough.
There's always something, there's always a technicality. They just don't want people to actually use their tax to actually put the money into where they need it. They want to have the delegation or whatever.
Yes.
100% choose.
They want all the control. Mm-hmm.
Right.
They want all the control. So I say all that, you don't have to use it, but because this is important. This year, 2022, this November, the sales tax is going to be back on the ballot, and we need to vote for it again.
And how is it changed this time? Do you think, like, did it?
There will be no IOC. Okay. There will be no IOC. They're going to write the charter to make sure that the things that were a problem the first time are not included. I think that's so important for people to know so that when they see it on the ballot again, they are not, that was a boondoggle, I'm not voting for it again. It wasn't a boondoggle. It was sabotage. It was sabotaged.
So basically, 2018, we had an awesome 1 cent sales tax that was going to be, this is going to throw money into mainly 45% HART, and the rest of it, we were going to have the IOC, which stands for the
Independent Oversight Committee.
And they're going to be a bunch of cool citizens that are going to be like, yep, that checks out, that goes to transportation, everything's cool, nothing's illegal, nothing's going to, like, you know, chai lattes, right? Republican comes in and he's like, this is unconstitutional because who are these bimbos choosing where money goes? Because imagine putting power to the people. That sucks. But that was a flop because in 2010, they tried to pass the same exact thing, which was without the IOC, and then someone else was like, what? You have no oversight. So what's happening? So the Republican Party stays in their flop era, and this time, 2022, it is back. It was doing good things because we had $300 million collected.
It creates $280 million a year.
Right. So it's back. Vote for it, because this time we have subtracted the IOC, except what they said they wanted, and to make sure that everything checks out so that it is constitutional. And we need this. Absolutely.
It's also important to note that HART's current budget is about $70 million a year. And if 45% of that money of $280 million generated by the 1 cent sales tax went to HART, it would effectively triple their budget. Can you imagine what HART could do with triple the budget?
No one's driving. We're all on the bus. Back to middle school days. No, yeah, it would literally be amazing because the thing is, I feel this way. I'm sure many people feel this way. If I didn't need a car, I would sell my car. I would not have one. And I'm sure lots of us would have that because what does that do for those of us that can ride the bus, have the privilege to get to a bus stop and use that, we can use that. And then for those who absolutely just need a car and that's the only option, they can use that. Like you said, trying to maximize the use of our space by not expanding, which is what Americans love to do. Okay, this has been great. Do you have any final notes that you want to give?
Yeah, so, and I feel like I barely scratched the surface here, but thank you so much for giving me this space to be able to talk about some of this stuff. There is one kind of major thing that I definitely want to talk about. Mm-hmm. Back to what's happening right now with the highway widening through Tampa Heights. It's not just through Tampa Heights, it's also, they're going to be widening through VM Ybor and historic Ybor City. These are all very historic, high density, primarily people of color neighborhoods. And the widening is also going to go all the way up to at least Hillsborough Avenue. Oh, wow. And the widening is to add an express lane, a tolled lane. So we're being taxed twice to build the road and to use it. And most of us aren't going to, probably, so it's not even for us. So it's adding a toll lane in either direction. The community is still fighting this. On January 5th, the Citizens Advisory Committee to the transportation planning organization, the TPO, it has a say over everything that happens with transportation. They have a citizens advisory committee, and that committee voted on and passed a resolution asking the TPO board to pass a moratorium on this widening, on this construction. The TPO never got to hear it because the chair of the CAC disagreed with the resolution and didn't properly present it to the TPO. Right. So we have asked for that to be presented again. And on this day, which is next Wednesday, February 9th at 10 a.m., this is an opportunity for us as a community to organize and show up and tell them to put a moratorium on the highway widening. There wasn't a proper public engagement process for this.
Yeah, at all.
Exactly. Who knows about this happening?
Literally, I didn't even know about it until we spoke about this.
Right. And what's especially troubling is that even most of the people in these neighborhoods who are going to have a wall moving several, dozens of feet towards their homes don't know about it either until FDOT is knocking on their door saying, hey, we have to do a site inspection because we're bringing the highway closer to your house.
Right. Thank you so much for giving us a lot of information. And I would like to, contact you again so we can speak more on this because it's going to be an ongoing issue. And, we like to have differing voices talk about these issues. As it develops, maybe we can do another one of these. Do you have any resources or socials that you want people to follow, whether that be you or an organization?
I do. Okay. I'm just thinking about, there were two things that I wanted to mention. Okay. In addition to the organizations that are doing the work, I was actually just brought onto the board of a local transportation organization.
Okay. Yeah. So what's that?
It's called the Sunshine Citizens. And the people came together in 2015 to fight this highway expansion, which first came to light back then. And back then they called it the TBX, the Tampa Bay Express. And the Sunshine Citizens organized people and effectively got FDOT to pump the brakes and slow down on the project and not just kind of plop it down and ram it through. But even though they slowed it down, it's still happening. So The Sunshine Citizens is ramping up to be more involved in fighting it. One of the socials that I definitely want to plug is Transit Now Tampa Bay. It is a Facebook page and a Facebook group. The page has been creating events for these government meetings, the TPO meetings and the CAC meeting, for people to go and speak. And the group page is more of a discussion page where people are sharing news articles and best practices on transportation. So TNTV, hashtag Transit Now is one thing that people can link into. Yeah, and so that's one thing. And then the other thing is I didn't really get to talk about the history of transportation planning and why. So highways are bad because they don't really work to transport people from A to B, and they have so many negative externalities, so many negatives and drawbacks to them, as well as all car-centric infrastructure. But encompassing all of that and underneath it and around it is this equity issue, this deeply racist history of and present of deciding to put the highway through Black communities.
Right.
I-4 was literally built over the Black Wall Street of Tampa, right over Central Avenue. So it has this history of injustice. By putting the highway there, it depressed the market values all around it, and those still remain as communities of color. So it is also everything that happens around highway investment and expansion tends to have a link to racial injustice.
Right.
So I think that's also really important for people to know that it's there's these best urban planning practices, but then there's also this racial justice issue.
Yeah, definitely. Because we definitely can't talk about highways without talking about how inextricably linked, as you said, that the racism that comes with building highways. So yeah, no,
that's
absolutely.
That urban renewal that we mentioned earlier. Basically, the highway was funded in 1956 with the Interstate and Defense Act by President Eisenhower. And they just used that in tandem with this Housing Act to fund the flattening of what they called blight and slums, which literally had demographics of people within the definition of those words, and used it as an excuse and a funding source to disrupt these neighborhoods, to flatten them and build the car freeways of the future right over them.
Right, yeah, and the highway system of the U.S. is named the Eisenhower Interstate something, right? So yeah, so like that still holds his legacy or whatever of just squandering neighborhoods of color.
It was planned in Tampa. The route of the highway was planned by an administration that was run by a political party called the White Municipal Party, which was an openly white supremacist political party. Curtis Hickson is named, so the park is named after Curtis Hickson, and he was the last member of the White Municipal Party. And so here we have like our main park is named after this man who people just don't know was a member of this white supremacist party.
Right.
And that's why urban planning is so fascinating, because everything has
it's all connected and leads back to white supremacists in Tampa. Right.
Pretty much.
Wow. Yeah, I had no idea about Curtis Hickson Park or that the planning originated in Tampa either. So that's wild and really good to know. And honestly just reinforces the fact that I think we definitely want to have you back. Because like you said, like we've only scratched the surface, and because there's the history, there's the recent history, it's happening right now, and then what could happen in the future, right? And people definitely need to know about all those things and be deeply enriched on all that. So, all right, Dayna, thank you so much for talking with me. I was gonna say us. There's lots of people here. And we'll definitely have you back because, as I said before, like this is an ongoing issue. We'll want to hear updates from you or anything that we didn't talk about today because we really just scratched the surface with this. And thank you for recognizing and speaking to like the deep racial ties that the highway system has, because a lot of times people are like, why bring up race or whatever, but it's really important for us to be like, because that's where this started, we're not trying to make it about race, it just is. So again, I gotta say thank you because it's like pulling teeth for some people.
Thank you for having me. This was great. Thanks for giving me the space. And I love talking to you, and I love talking to people about transportation. So please reach out to me and use me as a resource for any transportation questions or thoughts or whatever.
For sure. And we're going to include the links for all the things that Dayna talked about somewhere below. Just make sure to follow, like, subscribe, engage. Tell us what your favorite things that Dayna said, or maybe leave some questions that maybe we can ask Dayna next time she comes around. Whatever you're confused about or just want to hear more about, we would like to tell you about it. So leave that below. All right. Bye, everyone.